Okay. It's yeah, screen share. Yeah, I know. I overthought it. Okay, we did it right here. Okay. Okay, Chair Neff, we are ready. Oh, we're not meant ready. Sorry. We are ready. We are ready, but we're not. Jump the gun.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The Pleasant View Planning Commission meeting at Thursday, November 3rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. We'd like to go ahead and start this evening with a pledge of allegiance and opening prayer reading or expression of thought that will be offered by Commissioner Lynette.
All right, I chose to share a thought today. It's one of my favorites by Thomas Edison. It says, opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like. I just want to thank everybody for being here today and working together. Let's go ahead and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and look at the declaration of conflicts of interest. All of the commissioners have had a chance to read the agenda for tonight. Is there anyone that needs to declare any conflicts of interest for tonight's meeting? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward with item number 2. We have public hearing administrative consideration. The first item, 2A, my understanding is that will be removed from the agenda for tonight. That item, site plan, was already approved by this body by a consent, and so that item does not need to be addressed at this time.
That's correct, Chair. That was it during your June.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we will move to item 2C, the conditional use of site plan for RV and truck fuel station. Conditional use and site plan for the construction of an RV and truck fuel station located at 2709 Ruan White. We'll go ahead and turn the time over to staff and ask them to review it, which time will open up for.
Sure. The item before you this evening is a site plan review. This is an administrative item, so the Planning Commission's determination is that final determination. This does not go on to City Council for additional consideration. The site plan location is at 2705 North Ruan White Boulevard. The applicant is Jeff Exted, excuse me. And this is a site plan for commercial development. I will say, during your last meeting, you probably recall there was a request for a rezone on this property, and that rezone was approved by the Planning Commission and finalized during their meeting on Tuesday. So the zoning for this is now appropriate with that City Council approval. The tricky thing was when I wrote up the memo, the City Council had not yet approved it, so that's why it said City Council approval. And so with that, staff recommends the approval contingent on the final review and approval of the Development Review Committee. And there is a note from the fire indicating needed adjustments for the fire flow. So with that, this shows the vicinity map here. So it's right off of 2700 and Ruan White. This is meant to be a development next to the service station here, but a service area for RVs and diesel trucks. And the concept plan is included here for that site. And we've got the application here in the packet. So I don't know if there's any specific questions. I do have the engineer here. He's on the set. Sorry.
There we go.
So the staff, so it's basically complete, the staff review. The only thing that we're pending is Tyson is looking into any additional sanitary sewer requirements because it is a fueling station. And so we just need to check on that, and that would be just an additional comment from the DRC.
The two quick questions I have, and I know this falls under the fire department, probably not yours, but the water flow for the fire, have they addressed that one yet? Or is that something, we just put all the new road in, and is that gonna have to tear up what's just been put in?
No, it should, we'll get confirmation from Bonavista that they can make the 1500 GPM. I don't think it's gonna be a problem. When we built that road, we put in a 10-inch line.
Okay,
I don't anticipate any issues with that, but
That's just
we will
something-
confirm.
that'll have to be confirmed, as in the DRC will review that before it moves forward. And then my question, when I have not done much with the gas stations and that, where this is just an in and out constant fuel type of thing, what do we have? They're not doing any retention, detention type of things that flows to the system that's already been put in. And I'm not calling for sure, but do we have a some type to, if there's a spillage or if there's something else, how's that caught on theirs? So it doesn't just go down and drain.
Yes, so we're going to ask for an oil water separator prior to discharging to the city storm drain.
Okay. And that's covered, that's the word goes, start with an S. Was that?
Snout, so in lieu of a snout.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, the oil water separator is a larger structure that has higher capacity than just the snout.
is that something buried or is that building off to the side?
No, it's a buried structure.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for our engineer? We're lucky to have her here tonight to help us out.
And I know, the last time there were questions for people, just following, but yeah. Questions. Sorry, Chair, didn't mean to cut you off.
That was some of my critical questions.
Just for my own knowledge, because there is an RV dump portion there, does that become part of what is dumped there? Does that become part of the city waste, or does that have a separate kind of?
It flows into the city system.
It does flow into, okay, and that's all. I assume there's rules and regulations on. I've just seen some of those get pretty messy and what they're dumping through there with the chemicals and stuff, but.
And that was one of the things that Texas was checking up on, because it is kind of a different type of situation on the sewer side. It's
Okay, thank you.
That'll be whoever makes a motion one way or the other, will make sure that we require that to be pulled up by a DRC before we have them move on. Okay, any other questions for the engineer or staff?
So we do have the petitioner here.
We'll go ahead and ask the petitioner to come up, state his name and address, please.
Jeff Beckstead, 164 East 5600 South, Washington Terrace. Yep.
Any questions for the petitioner at this time?
This is a record from the last meeting. I know this item was tabled because of questions about in and outflow of traffic and which directions that would be traveling. I didn't know if we wanted to leave with that question.
That is one of my questions that I'm getting to is, I don't think, do you have the ability to pull the map up?
Do you want the site?
Let's
map?
start with that there. So one of the questions was how's the flow? And I understand you guys are connected with the Shell, is that right?
Yes.
So we're not, maybe fortunate or unfortunate, you're not gonna be able to connect to it. I don't know if the master plan was
Yeah, there's no
connect
way
the
to.
two lots because of the wonderful car wash. Which
Yeah, there's not a good way to connect, so we didn't worry about that. But as far as accessing, the arrows are indicated on the site plan.
Right there. They're great. But yeah, it does show full access.
Okay, and so are you mostly looking at, I would say, medium-sized trucks, or are we just planning on semi-trucks? And I guess that was the flow of, right now, it's kind of like crossing multiple yellow lanes to get over into the car wash side section, but on this one, are you looking at semis coming in one direction and then coming back out across on the far, at the top side, right?
Yeah, we're not gonna try to, well, not gonna try to determine their access because all the different rigs will have different fuel requirements on, depending on the side, so that's why there's access on both sides, so typically they would go in one side and out the other.
But you're not setting a,
No, it shows three,
you can come in this way or you can come in this way.
yeah, the arrows indicate, arrows indicate those 3 lanes for access.
One question, so let's just say all of the bays are full. What happens to the truck traffic out on Blue and White? How do they know? They just have to sit out and wait to see if an opening or?
Yeah, I mean, it would be just the same as any other entrance to any business. The parking lot is full or the drive-through is full, then they're gonna have to wait somewhere. They'd have to queue probably in the street, or they'd have to continue on and loop around there. So
There's a fair amount of congestion across the street that comes out of the industrial park. You just know it's just lines and lines of trucks that are coming out, and I know that's an issue right there. In
that are
terms of,
turning left, the ones that are turning left,
yeah,
heading out to the freeway.
yeah, the ones that are going out. I've just noticed that, especially with that car wash, trying to get a vehicle turning left. I've been one of those trying to get left where you got just a lineup. Yeah, and I guess the concern is, where does that lineup end? Where, we've got Shell there that's.
We're quite a ways from the intersection, so that's not going to be. For you, you just turn right instead.
Yeah, I just wonder if, and I know we're not here to provide, it just seems like a lot of work for a truck driver to come all the way that way and then see it's full. And then they're gonna have to either come back around. I'm just on Google Maps now. I guess they can come full circle and just keep going around in circles. How would they do that?
I can't really do much with the queuing of trucks or thing like that.
It's that busy.
There are 4 stalls, and then inside there would be availability for 2 to 3 actually with the queue, depending on the flow. I mean, you're gonna have as many as 6, which, as you said, would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd like to have that problem, so.
Pretty good sized lot. I have a question. I don't know if I can throw this at staff or the petitioner, but there's a proposed building in the park.
Yeah, it's actually just we haven't really worked with that. It's just a shed or storage. We may do something, we may not, but it's gonna, if it's over the 200 square feet, we'll, do the usual for building permit and so forth. But right now, that's just put there as kind of a holding place for in the intent that we have anything there. So.
Okay, so some of the things that I noticed is we still need to get the definition for the dumpster defined, and I don't know if that's taking place yet on the draft. So a few of those things, are those spelled out in your notes then? They're on the red lines, okay. And then the building, if it's over a certain size, then you'll have to come back. Any other questions for the petitioner this time? Thank you very much.
Okay, and I just asked that we could get approved tonight, and then we can move forward with all of the requirements that the DRC has. So that's kind of standard. So
Okay,
thank you.
we need to open this for a public hearing.
Like hearing.
Julie's opened, made a motion to open public hearing. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Chad. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now open into a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to address the community on this? Come on. I'm just kidding. Last couple weeks ago, we had a full house, so this is kind of different. It's kind of nice. Patel? Discharge, there you go. just fill up while you're there. All right, any other questions from the public? Hearing none, I'm taking motion that we close. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Have a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have a second? We have a second by Jim. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, this is up for discussion or any other questions to staff?
I've got a question, maybe namely because I'm not that knowledgeable on this. But when RVs come and dump and it's going into our sewer system, then everything that goes into our sewer system is really the city responsibility. We're paying, right, for that sewer. So doesn't this create extra cost for the city when it's like an RV dump and people from basically cities rather than Pleasantview are using it? And yet the citizens from Pleasantview are paying that increased cost. And I'm just curious how that works.
So and Dana may be able to help me a little bit on this, but with the sewer side of it, there is infrastructure that is relative to the city, and we do charge impact fees for some of that. That impacts all of residents. So to your point, if there's people from outside of the community utilizing that, that would have an impact. But from what I understand, because of the site, they'll have their own sewer line and pay that portion of the usage. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what my question is. Does this increase the cost to the city?
I don't believe so, no. It's
Yeah,
just
that's
the
a good
hookup.
question, but
Each separate hookup.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or discussion between the commissioners?
I'm gonna, just the one, I noticed one thing on page, what page is it? You just have the address incorrect. Oh, well, one of them's incorrect. I'm not sure which one.
Oh,
Just looking at your site plan review, it says 2705 north. I think it's 2709. So just for the price. And so it looks like it might be page 1 of this section. Yeah, go up a little bit higher.
Oh,
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Oh, that's done. Okay, I just noticed that I didn't know further notes that needed to be,
No, that's just my staff memo, so my apologies.
Okay.
I can't wait to get a plan of her. Have you guys heard that yet?
Okay, if there's
Thank
no other
you.
discussion. We have someone that'd like to
Good
make a motion.
I'll make,
Go ahead.
no,
Go ahead, Julie.
you spoke first. I'll second.
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit and site plan for the RV and truck fuel station, item number 2, or 2C,
Conditions.
with the conditions outlined in the staff report and DRC. And what was the one about the sewer or Tyson verifies the.
And that would be addressed with the DRC, so that's just fine.
Is this conditional to jumpstart or just before we get seconded? This isn't a conditional. Where are they approving? Because it's a site plan, so we're approving it tonight. Not the this isn't a conditional use, is it?
It is a conditional use in the zone.
Okay.
So it's,
All right, so his motion stands.
Yeah.
We have a motion on the table by Commissioner Jeff. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Lori. Do we have any discussion on the topic?
Julie.
Julie, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sitting there looking at Julie thinking, I gotta say the name. So Lori can hear the names, so Julie. Do we have any discussion on the topic? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, we are passed for tonight and we'll get that, you can work with them on our red lines and the follow-up items. So appreciate you showing up tonight and walking us through that. We'd like to go ahead and make mention of the public hearing administrative item number D, which is a commercial use permit site plan for Pole Patch number 2 subdivision That has been, we don't need to table it officially or do we?
You do need to officially
Okay.
table it. So the application that was received with that, is along the fault line, and so they dumped, on the site plan, the housing unit forward, but it doesn't meet our setback requirements. They're gonna look at pursuing, possibly going to the Board of Adjustment or revising their plans. Those are their options at this point. So I recommend that you table that at this time, so we don't have to make them start from completely scratch, but they'll need to bring back another proposal that meets our ordinances.
Right. And since this is administrative item, we have to go ahead. Table the conditional use and site plan for construction of a single family home at Waterfall Drive, lot number 28, full patch number 2 subdivision. It's been recommended that we table it for tonight rather than move forward. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll motion that we table item 2D, the conditional use permit and site plan for Pole Patch 2 subdivision.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Well, second.
Have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move now to a public hearing, the legislative consideration and recommendation items. We are looking at 3 different items. Do you want to do that all together?
Yes.
That's what I would suggest. We'll turn the time over to staff to talk about our, this was brought up to us. We brought it up also that we recommend to the city council to allow and to recommend that we look at changes to our car wash and how it poses into the different zones. We'll turn the time over to staff and have them make a recommendation.
Happy to do so. Before you this evening, and it looks a lot gnarlier, scarier than it is, but it's a recommendation for some zone text ordinance amendments relative to allowance of the use of car washes, both automatic and self-service. And in looking at this, and with some recent car wash developments coming, which is great, and we're happy to see that. There's also some concerns with water and some different things in that nature. So in looking at our zoning and talking with the ombudsman's office, we're looking at a recommendation that would basically preclude any additional car washes except for in the CP3 zone. And I'm happy to pull that map up for you. This is something that the Planning Commission can consider, but we'll go to the City Council. If you recommend approval, then we'll draft an ordinance. If you recommend denial, then we'll just take that recommendation denial to the City Council. So if you look at the zoning map here, and I, obviously welcome the discussion here. But oh, sorry. The CP3 is all water, and so I will state with keeping this in this zoning, that doesn't necessarily guarantee the allowance of it. It would be dependent on the will serve water.
Which areas, can we just highlight which areas are left?
I'm sorry.
We have this one here.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Let me hop on.
Car, nice and shiny. I don't.
Now, my car is not.
I'm just jealous. I just learned something new tonight.
Okay, so.
Does it work?
Oh. Well, whoever's joining us on YouTube, my apologies. Okay, so the CP3 is the dark blue. There is, CP3 here, so that actually,
That's Pepsi.
they're actually unrunnable to water. But I think there's another Oh, yeah. There's CP3 here as well. And then,
Which, did we just change the zone for that one, or did we
this
just,
over here.
Yeah.
There's
or was that a,
no, the developments that are come before you for this.
oh, that was
Here.
down this
Uh-huh.
combination?
And then.
Double checking, that would end up being somewhere where we absolutely don't
Well,
want.
that's,
So Jeff's house had a little sliver of CP3 or.
and I will comment that, with the recent development that was approved in the CP2, this will have no bearing or impact on that. We went through the process, so this is just for any future.
First thoughts, do you like it? Do you want to see it in somewhere else? Do you don't want to changes? You're welcome to make changes.
I don't see any, it's all developed already, isn't it? What's left or? am
So
I-
basically, there's one spot down here that it would allow it. And part of it too, and right now, it's allowable in all of this manufacturing. So the current zones that car washes are allowed, and I guess that's part of the dialogue here is what you'd like to recommend. Include the manufacturing commercial mixed zone, the MCM, the planned manufacturing zone, the MC1, neighborhood commercial C1, neighborhood general commercial C2, planned commercial zone C1, and then planned commercial zone.
We're disallowing it in those.
Correct, that would be the proposal. And then it would only be allowed basically here, or there is some land that's undeveloped on the 50 foot. But I would be surprised if that would be very workable, but it would be an option.
And what was the NP1 zone and 4C zoning ordinance section? Disallowed.
Yeah, so that's a separate item.
Separate.
Mhm.
We'll just do an A and B.
And so, well, so A, yes, A is to disallow in the various zones. B is actually to switch from allowed in the CP3 to conditional. And one of the things, and we're working on and going to be bringing forward some ordinance language for conditional uses relative to water use, because it's not just car washes, there's other items that utilize a lot of water. But we're taking some time to look into that. And really just, we don't want to limit development. We just want to maximize our water supply and make sure we're prudent with it.
Any other questions for staff? Or items, or we can talk about it amongst our groups. This does require a public hearing, so we'll just do a public hearing for A and B at this time. Can we do them both at the same time, or do we have to do them separate?
I would think maybe separately, and
Okay, so
I don't know.
Let's open a public hearing for 4A if someone would like to make a
I'll make a motion that we open the public hearing for item 4A.
have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jeez.
She got it.
It's
All
on
right.
you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, we're now in a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who knew Brett had been here for something? So please approach. I was hoping it was C. You wanted to build a house down in the MP1.
I'm kind of against the fact of just seeing one single. I don't have any plans for a car wash. I don't have any ties to the car wash. But it's not the automatic route. Does anybody know how much water they have?
So just with the recent, I think.
It was the one on his land. We actually did ask that question. We went into that.
$350,000
Oh, whether they wash their cars in Pleasant, they're going to wash their cars. You guys all wash your cars. To me, I think it's a slippery slope to start taking one thing out of a zone at a time. And you know, you're going to discourage developers from Cause that her car wash was next. And I'm gonna, you know, in the industrial area that we're gonna do, we're gonna need a truck wash. That many semi trucks, we need a place to wash trucks. And so you're by this excluding us from having that in the industrial.
And to clarify, and so with a truck wash, if it's a commercial thing, if that's what you're looking to do, I think that feedback is good and valuable here, but that would preclude that. If it's something that's on site, part of the site plan, then that's not necessarily going to preclude that. So it depends on what you're looking to propose, but I think that feedback's absolutely valid at this point.
Most industrial areas have a truck wash. Truck comes in off the freeway in a winter storm, maybe you get their stuff cleaned up before they see out the windows. But I don't know, I just disagree with seeing that one thing out. I mean, you don't want car washes. I don't think that's a valid reason. So, and we're gonna need to have that exception. At MP1 too. And I think in MP1 zone, I don't know why this would get excluded from MP1 zone, that it's industrial area. It's not front and center of the streets. I would hope you don't pass it.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Is there anybody else from the city or the county that would like to have a public comment for tonight while we're in the public hearing? Okay, no public hearing, we'll take a motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion to close. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, so we've heard a little bit of the feedback.
And just one clarification too, just with your review and consideration this evening. If you feel comfortable including all of the zones for recommendation to city council, that's an option. If some of the zones you're not comfortable with, obviously this can be modified. This is just a list of all of the zones that are currently included in. I know as city staff, we just have concerns with the amount of water that the car washes utilize. So this is a staff initiated.
It's one thing, I guess, we open it up there now for discussion from the commissioners, you know, because we're making a recommendation to either deny this or to recommend one way or the other to the city council, and they'll have a say in this. But kind of as what was the last car wash that came before us, there was immediately a little apprehension of water, which we couldn't stop it because that's what's on the books, and it made sense. But the question is we're not denying car washes from our citizens, but we have to make sure that we're reasonable within our city, that we use the adequate amount of resources. But there's plenty of car washes within our city now that people can use. So it's not like we're denying it. So.
Herman, may I ask a question to Mr. Bailey?
He's willing to answer it. You're welcome to.
When you're talking about the trucks coming in the MP1 zone and needing to be washed, right? Are they paying for that, or is that something provided by?
Okay.
Oh, they are paying for it, and so. Okay, so would you say that those are a separate entity from most commercial car washes? Because most commercial car washes I know of are not high enough or broad enough for many of those type of grids. Is that true?
It's a total different thing. Yeah.
So it's a little different. What I'm trying to do here is separate out the difference from commercial public car wash for cars versus ones in the manufacturing zone that are used to provide a special car wash for, say, semi-trailers.
And
It seems to me like there is a difference there, because I would imagine most of the semis, I don't know that I've ever seen a semi going through a regular car wash. Right? You don't. And so really what Grant's trying to address is what facility or what do we provide for commercial trucks in our city to provide that service?
Correct. And I would say with the way that car wash is defined in our ordinance and the self-serve, if a wash for those type of trucks were established, you know, a commercial type thing, that would be classified the same. So if that's something that you feel the need isn't there right now, I think you'd want to look at which zones you feel would be appropriate and then remove that from the recommendation to the city council.
Say 10 years down the road. People can still watch the trying to take the market.
One thing we have. Sir, do you have a comment? Yeah. And that was the part I was gonna, and that's the part I was gonna pull back for our discussion was, you know, the reason that we're looking at this was specifically to come back to, you know, we only have so much water resources, we use it all up on a couple businesses because that's in the calculation now. How much does it dry up for the developers that want to say, hey, I want to put these houses in? Well, we don't have adequate water. I mean, so it's kind of a, right, but that's what I'm just saying. There's points on either side. Now, just so as a point of source, I don't know if you've ever got off the freeway I-15, where they're in Ogden, where there's the Flying J on one side and the Chevron on the other side. Right across from the McDonald's, there's a big truck car wash. Excuse me, a truck wash. They pull through there. On the other side of by the Chevron, there's a big truck car wash also over there. So here's the question: is could we modify and actually put wording in there that says, okay, car washes are not allowed in any of these, but we would entertain a truck wash in an MP. I don't know, I guess the MP1 zone. Now is that Bonavista water or is that our water?
And the hard thing, it really shouldn't be, I mean, we looked at that a little bit, but you know, where in the city is it appropriate to have the use or not necessarily the water source. My point with Bonavista is if it's off of the Bonavista service line, then they're gonna have to get their blessing to utilize that line. Within our city, you know, it really, that's. So it's a conditional use in a lot of the different zones. The challenge is, and not that it's an issue, but our conditions wouldn't preclude allowing it. The way that state law is, a conditional use is allowed to be conditional. Well, and that's something that we've got to bed. I don't know.
So I guess if we wanted to still make this recommendation, it's not precluding someone coming in the future and saying, hey, I'd like to add this, you know, this usage to the zone because this is what I'd like to do. I mean, they can always come back and ask, you know, a new planning commission or city council to add that if there is a need, like he says, if the need increases to where it's needed to be put back. But at this time, I'm still thinking that the water is going to be a bigger issue at this time.
I mean, we were fortunate with the last car wash that he went through and explained all of the water preserving methods that particular car wash is going through to put water back into the system to recycle it. However, you can't know what a car wash is going to do. Somebody else could have done it, and it was just flushing down drain, and we were fortunate on that one.
Another question. Something was discussed earlier about that there was a report of how much car washes actually use water.
Oh,
I don't, I
it
haven't
was
seen that.
just, when we had a, car wash come before, they provided that information. I'm happy to provide that, but I think it was an average of 350,000 gallons a month. And that's with 70% recycled water usage.
And that's a concern for the city. Okay. I have nothing to compare that to, like, what, but we're not comparing to a home, we're comparing to like a commercial business, so. I mean, that's apples and oranges. I would like to see something compared to that would be, you know, I mean, yeah, something relevant, like what is Bella's, you know, monthly use, or Walmart? Or even, yeah, even.
Well, and part of the challenge too, I will say, I mean, because the park uses secondary water, car wash uses culinary water. And so that's kind of some of the thought process. And frankly, if there's discomfort, you can absolutely, you know, vote, recommend denial. You can table it. If there's additional information that staff can get and provide, we're happy to do that. We don't want to push anything. It's not, I don't feel staff feels extremely strongly that this needs to happen. I just know there were questions about which zones car washes were allowed and brought this forward. And frankly, it's easier in a notice, and appreciate Brent coming tonight to list all of them. And then if you'd like to still have some of those zones included, to maybe make a recommendation, you know, for it to be removed from, you know, zones.
It has to be
Because secondary water isn't clean enough. Secondary water is not clean. Can you show us the MP1? On the map.
Okay, so the M1 is the slight purple. You can up here. So let's go there.
Those sounds no Buena Vista.
Correct.
So if we were to as is, and then a developer wanted to wash in one of the other zones, that would allow us the opportunity to on it that maybe we couldn't. Is
So
that what you're
it's allowed entirely. So if you'd like to put conditions on it, then item
But if
B
somebody
is-
came and said, hey, I want to, sure, it's probably not allowed, what would it take for me?
they'd have to get for zoning.
Right, right. And then that allows us to put more conditions on it.
So what if we made the recommendation as is and looked at excluding an MP1 zone?
Can you exclude it from being a car wash to be a truck? Can we create is there a category for truck wash?
So there's not, so that would be a separate item that would need to happen. That's something you could recommend to the city council,
So we
to
could
break that
recommend,
out with a definition for a truck
we
wash.
could recommend this items to pull these out. But we could suggest in our recommendation that the city council look at allowing us to add a recommendation of putting a truck wash category.
I would say that gets a little bit messy. I think it's cleaner to frankly have it just as one consistent use, because let's say, I mean, there's a different type of vehicle that they wish to wash, or, I mean, it just, how do you define that? And it's a little bit messy.
Is there a way to require a car wash to recycle a certain amount of water? Or
So
not really?
that's where that's pretty messy, and we're looking into some research on what types of conditions we could set, but I think that gets really tricky. And to Brent's point, I mean, that's kind of getting into the hands of business. But again, I mean, this is something, you know, to look at, list all the zones, and part of why we listed all the zones wasn't necessarily for an all right ban, but allow you to have the discussion freely on which zones you feel it's appropriate in or not.
So we could make a recommendation to move forward with this, but also make a suggestion that we revisit the car wash in the MP1 zone when you mentioned that we're looking at a few other ones, and we could recommend that we look at potentially bringing that back into the MP1 if it makes sense at that time when we're reviewing the others. But at this time, we could lock.
The others we're looking at is a completely different thing, and that would be conditions in the different zones relative to water. And that, again, I mean, it's very legally complex. It's gonna take a lot of time to get through that, frankly.
But in the meantime, we could lock these down until we decide whether we want to add that back in at the time with the
Yeah,
other
that's an
water, with the
option for you.
water items.
And it sounded like there were some questions that you could table it, you could remove some of them.
If we table, what are the things that you like to do from staff that would
Sounded like
help you make
more
it?
specific information about how.
Well, I mean, I'm just coming from my perspective. It seems like the issue is water, and so we're trying to limit the number of car washes by zone, by the zoning, as opposed to the limiting factor is the water. And so without any knowledge of like what the impact is, I mean, gallons have been spoken to. I feel like I'm not at a place to vote. You know, it seems like I'm needing more information to make a decision. So to table and to get what is the actual impact of one commercial car wash against the bill that we pay Bona Vista or whoever else we're paying? What is that impact on a monthly basis? And then is there some issues about actual supply? Is Bona Vista saying there's not enough for this? To me, it seems like we're targeting a specific a specific industry, if you want to call it that, for and we're using zoning as the way to do that. And to me, it kind of comes off, I don't know. It seems like I need more information. That I'll just leave it at that.
No, and I appreciate those comments, and I will say one thing, and I understand more fully what information you're looking for, but the challenge is going to be, and Commissioner Pardon made this point a little bit earlier, but each business is gonna operate a little bit different with a car wash. So I think, and I appreciate your comments, because we really shouldn't be using land use as necessarily a tool for water, but it partly is designed to do that. But the question being, you know, what zones are appropriate for car washes? And then also, you know, do you want them in every zone? Do you want, Because I will say, you know, going into the code, that it is relatively allowed in everything but residential. So that's a question, you know, and maybe that's okay, maybe that's what's best for the community, maybe not. The general plan really doesn't speak specifically to this, they just talk about commercial businesses. I will say generally, commercial isn't in manufacturing, except for in the MCM, which is the manufacturing commercial mix, just with the way those zoning ordinances are defined. So that honestly seems like a little bit better fit to me. I mean, rather than just the broad manufacturing, but you know, obviously property owners, others have input and maybe see a better use, or maybe there should be other definitions.
What do we have MCM?
Yeah.
Do we even have any of that?
You pointed that
The
out.
dark purple.
The
Okay.
dark purple,
Yeah, the MCM is the dark purple.
MCM's dark purple.
But I mean, it sounds like that wouldn't, there's some other interest too, so. But that's what that zone is manufacturing commercial mix. But, and maybe it is, you know, specifically to the MP1 zone, a truck wash.
So do we not have a truck wash at all?
You know, I see the benefit of allowing like a truck wash to go in somewhere, just because if we are trying to develop an area, which we are, and attract commercial and manufacturing, which we are, and a truck wash is an important part of that. It seems like we really need to be open to that being a possibility. So maybe it's a matter of looking at which zone we could allow a car wash or a truck wash, and then going ahead on these others where we know that we really would like to permit it.
I'm just trying to remember, yeah, actually we have one of those, but Far West might have one. They had one over in Consolidated over there with your breaks, break over in front of Associated Foods. I think they've got a truck wash at their own. Yeah, it's their personal, but you've asked me, their one, Far West has one. The group right in front of Associated Foods.
That's where.
Well, that's what she was saying. Is
It's
what if
hard
someone
to
actually
find.
drove their car in it for once and I haven't seen that.
Hop on the mic there.
So
Sorry.
you may not, it may not be specified as just a truck wash, but depending on where it's located, a lot of cars probably wouldn't go there
No,
into a manufacturing commercial zone to wash their cars.
unless they build it as a dual purpose place.
So on the water line, the water is built. Most of them buildings, you accept, you water. You get a building that has. Toilet. Here you have a 25-acre site of that's the building. Used to clean water business. Still got to wash the building. So. I hate restaurant like that.
It's still the whole accumulation of water use, I guess, is the issue.
Well, and I think it really goes back to the types of uses you want in the area and which areas, and obviously you could break that into a truck wash, but I kind of agree with where Brent's coming from. I think it's just cleaner if a wash is appropriate. We don't specify the type of vehicle, because then it's code enforcement over there. Oh, I just saw them go through that.
But I would think the zone alone will somewhat make a difference on whether it's being used more for trucks or cars.
And did you have some input? Okay.
It's like inside of there. Oh,
It'd be their business rather than.
okay.
I don't know, I don't know of anybody, who out there in DDO is doing an internal truck wash? Out of DDO? I haven't seen them with internal wash. But if they're internal, that's their own thing, and that doesn't fall under as a separate business. That'd be a site plan build for their own.
Yeah, and based on the language, Dana showed me in that zone, in the MP1, it would be allowed as accessory use, so that wouldn't be precluding that, but it would be precluding
think we just leave
commercial.
that
if-
there.
Takes care of it.
Well, it takes care of it for business ones, but it doesn't if they were to have a commercial truck wash. So that's the.
What he's saying is they could have an accessory for that area if it's that business wants to have one of those.
I think Brent's speaking to both,
That's like,
accessory on site as well as a commercial. I don't mean to speak for you.
does anybody feel strongly one way or the other? Any other discussion items? We could beat this thing up several ways, or we can ask questions.
Well, is there any other way to control with water other than zone? This specific,
So yes and no, with conditions, but we're trying to vet through and water issues are very legally complex. Some conditions within each of the zones for conditional uses. And so I would recommend, because some of these are not conditional, they're just allowed. So at the very least, if you wish to move forward, keeping all of these in, maybe looking at having those as conditional uses, so they would come forward before the planning commission each time to vet that and to have that dialogue and discussion. And there may be some point where we have some conditions relative to water that maybe there's a maximum amount of water usage per month, but I don't know if we could even go. Again, it's very legally complex and it's a tricky deal. I mean, water is some, it's a survival mechanism. So
in other words, could we go ahead with it the way it is, but write it that it's a conditional use permit in the MCM zones?
So the MCM and the MP1?
The only question I have with that is, and I like where you're going with this, the only thing I have is, when we look back up at our map, are you okay with having these? If someone comes in and wants to build a car wash / truck wash, or does that fit our master plan? Does that fit the look and what we want in those areas?
And that's, where the master plan really just addresses commercial and car washes are kind of folded into that because of the way the zoning is. That goes back to your question. But one of the things, we've got obviously a lot of uses coming in these with the C2 and the CP2, we obviously have a car wash going in there. We're actually very excited to work with on that. But what is the city's vision? And this is where it gets a little bit, looking from a visionary standpoint of the future of the city. Do you want more car washes there? Do you feel it's appropriate? Is that something that we support? In talking with the ombudsman's office, and my intent is not to ban car washes outright, but what are our options with limiting those? And they said it's not a protected use. That isn't to say that we should ban it by any means or stretch the imagination, but just it's kind of up to the vision and the future of the city, what you hope to accomplish with our zoning.
So our MCM zone is really pretty limited. It's that dark purple, but it's all in commercial or manufacturing areas.
And I will
correct?
say in the zoning definitions, even though the MP1 specifies manufacturing, there are some commercial uses that are allowable. It's just less of an emphasis on. So that doesn't mean that other commercial uses won't happen on this land. And if that's helpful, but,
Which property you talking about, the big tilt top that you work on? Okay. Yeah,
I didn't know if you wanted me to put your land out on the map.
if we make a recommendation to the city, I'm just throwing this out there to the group, but I wanted for my clarification, we could actually, a little more specific, we would say, we recommend to the city that we pass these, but we do a conditional use in this zone and this zone, similar to what Julie said. But how is that accepted with this? The city council now reviews it. They look at the same thing that we look at.
No, so
Are they-
what they'll look at is your recommendation.
But
So-
they have the opportunity to look at it and say, you know what, we agree with you on all of these, but we disagree with you on that. We're going to make a change. At that time, they can actually make it. We're just recommending this is what we think,
Correct,
and
but
they
they
still have a final approval or denial or change. Yeah, that's what we said.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding it right, they have the ability to slightly change or take our recommendation as is, or they can change.
So with your, they can change based on what's noticed. So like right now with what you have noticed, because it's precluding these uses, you can add them back in because the notice is, if that makes sense, because it's already allowed, or put it as conditional because it's not more restrictive, but you can't, like the city council can't with what's noticed. So if you make a recommendation, that's what we'll notice. They can't add restrictions. They could only soften them.
But if it's already, oh, they wouldn't be able to take it off. They'd have to come back to us if they wanted to limit it. If they wanted to limit, if we're recommending leaving it in or making it a conditional in the MCM or MP1, that's as far as they could take it. They couldn't take it out of those two. They could
No,
send it
we could make a motion requesting language to do that to come to you all
Right.
again, and we could go in a big circle. But that's Chad's dream.
No, this could also end a deal, couldn't they? If they
So
could say we don't.
Ultimately,
want to
when
give
the
that
land
much
is
water.
developed, the properties that are on Buena Vista Water, and it's the exact same with city water, have to get a will serve for those uses. So one of the things that Buena Vista has done recently is change the amount of landscaping that they allow for outdoor, which is kind of maybe it's a little bumpy with our code, because they're trying to restrict water usage
Yeah.
for outdoor usage. So I don't know, yeah. It's very sensitive, in lots of ways, but, so they could absolutely modify that. That's in their purview. And that's not something that we control. So even,
Right, I was just saying that would be another way that water could be controlled is if Buena Vista did it.
I think that goes to my question on, is there something else that can like control or be the intermediary between, the water issue? To me, I'm still struggling with zoning being the linchpin that creates the, whether the restriction, whether the water is used or not. So.
and zoning, based on, again, my discussion with Ombudsman's office, can be used as a tool for that, but there are other tools, absolutely. There's provisions in state law that allow city officials, because of drought conditions and severe drought conditions, to limit different water uses. We did that a couple of years ago with outdoor uses when Pine View shut down its services. It's a really tricky deal, but there are some powers and authorities with regards to that. I think the main thing is just with future planning, if you have several high water users that are operating within the city, then that just, takes away from other options. But that's not to say that it shouldn't happen or those uses aren't needed or helpful to the community either. So it really is a tricky balance.
We can almost go round and round on circles on this.
Yeah.
So, because we can go both ways. So just as a quick reminder, we can actually make a recommendation as is. We can make a recommendation with some changes to it. We can recommend to them that they pass this with the changes, or we can recommend denial, or we can table. But if all I ask is whoever, if make a recommendation to table, is that we actually give some details to staff of what do we want to see, because otherwise we're just table it and it just stays on limbo. But what do we want to have them actually try to research or find out that actually would change the mind, or what could they produce actually with some meat behind it to produce? Otherwise, we're just going to see this again and it's going to go full circle and everything else. So, but I think the thing to keep in mind is back to our general plan, back to the layout of our city is, do we see these in certain areas? Well, some of these I say, well, I definitely don't want these in this area, this area, this. So I would say, for sure want to move ahead with not having it in some areas. The only question is, so Julie, you had something, I cut you off.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm listening and agreeing.
So with that, does anybody want to make a motion? Does anybody have any final discussion items?
I think I would be comfortable making a motion on the zoning ordinance text amendment to disallow the uses of a car wash, self-service, manual spraying, car wash, automatic in the following zones: neighborhood commercial zone, C1, general commercial zone, C2, planned commercial zone, CP1, and planned commercial zone, CP2, with a recommendation that there be a conditional use permit in manufacturing commercial mix zone, MCM, and planned manufacturing zone, MP1.
Corey, did we get that? Okay.
You're saying the dark purple and the light purple, is that right?
Yeah, so her recommendation would be the dark and light purple, so the MCM and the MP1 would be conditional.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
However, could I say that I'm open to other, if you think it should be limited,
We have a motion on the table, but we have a second. That second will make some recommendation changes.
if you guys want to recommend it.
We have a second on the table.
Not it can die.
Oh, Chad, I feel like I don't really know enough to really know.
Oh.
A motion on the table. If not on a second, then we can pull it hold if you were willing to withdraw your motion. If there's no second,
Withdraw.
okay. We now have a withdrawn motion. Do we have any other motions on the table?
What happens if we can't agree? Then we're just tabling it, right?
Well, you can
Have
table
to have,
it
have to have
Yeah.
a motion for that.
or recommend denial.
I've got a question on that. If we table it, and then in the meantime, we have multiple people come forward with car washes. Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. with it being tabled.
We're still, my understanding is because it's under an advisement or under review, someone can't come in and try to,
Until
Do
we
an application.
figure it out.
And I'm not certain how that works with tabling. I mean, because unless you're tabling to a date certain and you know when we're gonna review it, I think that would not.
it'd have to be a table first. That's why I asked for, if you're tabling it, why, what would you like to see? And we want to see it back in X amount of time. It's got to be some time sensitive. You know, otherwise, all it's just gonna do is sit out in limbo, and I don't think we wouldn't get away with
That's
that.
really not fair either. And I will say, and not to speak to specifics, but we have had some inquiries about car washes in the community. So there, I know that there's some that are interested in applications.
And I would say we aren't the only city grappling with these sort of issues. I know in North Ogden that they have had multiple requests in certain areas, and they too are speaking up and saying, do we want one block to be filled with car washes? We're not the only ones dealing with this. Car washes right now are very profitable. You have a lot of people wanting to put them in. And we have to think, is this what we want our commercial corridor filled with?
But I mean, truthfully, how many car washes are going to go on 23rd North?
I think you could
An
be
easy, quick
surprised.
build.
I know of two who want to be in North Ogden on 22nd North, personally. So.
I think going back to my original concern, to me, it seems like we've got the wrong answer. This is my opinion. To control, something in the competitive environment that should control itself. Is it Mr. Bailey? To his point of the car washes can't exist without customers. So, depending on how many actually come in, they can only survive if people are using them and there's demand. To me, impact study, and then again on specific water use in comparison to other entities. If we're going to call out car washing, why aren't we calling out another entity that uses, I don't know, who knows, gallons of water that might be similar. And then just blanked on what my last thought was. So comparison, impact, and then if Bona Vista has control in those areas, and if we have control with water decisions, I think that, to me, that's relevant information of not controlling who builds what where, but there's control in limiting factors of the actual water, not the zone.
Yes, please. No,
Get on the mic though, sorry. We are streaming on YouTube for our YouTube audience.
I can see what you're saying, and that makes sense. Going after a particular title business is maybe not well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. The approach is addressing car washes. Maybe the approach should be addressing water usage. This is the allotment, a particular business could have. Does that make
But
sense?
see, I think that gets messier and more
You
complex.
can actually do that though. I just looked it up. So what I'm saying too, and it's none of my business again yet, it will be my business later. But the other thing to that too is to Chad's point, the understanding of what our water situation is in the city is really important of how we allocate water. What happens when ERUs are used? So you all know what an ERU is, right?
Equivalent residential unit.
And thank you. And so based on what the state requires that you have to have available for businesses or individual residential units, to provide, to be available, oh my gosh, I'll just stand right out of here, is how much, then you need, so you need to understand how much water is required to be available to any particular business or any particular home. Then you need to ask the questions of how much water do we have? How much are you using? But to single out a business, to Brent's point, whatever, is a little bit more difficult that way. But, you know, just some things to consider. You guys have lots of options here to.
So when you said you looked it up, are you saying that other cities are making restrictions based on a certain amount of gallon?
Well, they're actually, and Brent has an extremely valid point with his businesses. I never knew it for us. That totally makes sense. You know, that makes sense. But, really, heck.
You're ordering a new system. I'm sorry.
Anyway, just, it's not so much about a business, it's about how much water you've got. But commercial space is also valuable too. And going after a particular business that way, does that make sense? I'm actually, I would like to know what you said, maybe later. But
Well, no, I'm happy to put it on the record. So I called the ombudsman's office and said, is there issue with restricting a specific type of business? And the locations as to where they are, and if you completely, and again, this was not my intent to completely ban car washes, but eliminated the uses. It's a use, no, it's not a business, because that would be an individual. And there's certain businesses that have some protections, like sexually oriented businesses, you need to allow a space in your community. But for the main part, you know, there really isn't anything that precludes you from removing this from all of your zones. Now, whether or not that's good practice, I would agree with Brent that that's probably not good for the free market. But it is something, and that came up with our last discussion on the car wash and why we brought this forward, and my apologies if it's caused consternation, but is to look at where do we want to have car washes, and that's the main focus, and with the spacing, obviously, of where those are, how many areas of the city would that be allowed?
So that's the point I guess I try to keep bringing us back to is, yes, the water is an issue. And that's part of what brought it up from the last time you were here. The other car wash person was saying, well, we're gonna use this much. And we said, we better talk to the city council, see if they want us to look at it. Because it was like, wow. Everybody's in conserving right now. We're all trying to watch our water. So, you know, X amount of years down the road, it may not. But what I want to focus it down and bring it back to is, where do we want it, right? Do you want 5 of them down 2,700? You know, sooner or later, a business owner is going to say, well, I can't put another one. I mean, we all kind of question Quick Black when they put theirs in, because there's one there, there's one across the street, there's already 5 there, and now there's another one come down. You know, so we have several in our city. The question to me is more of, when we look at this map, do you see yourselves wanting them in a neighborhood commercial? Do you see them in the general commercial? Do you see them in any of these areas? Because if we don't, we could recommend those out. If we still have questions for a manufacturing area, then maybe our recommendation is to go ahead and let them until we can get more definition. But do you see, we'll call it car wash / truck wash in those areas? Do we want to use up our commercial space for those areas? Do you want to use up your retail space, you know, going down the CP1? That's why I pull it back to the map and just say, you know, what fits. That's the only thing when we say we control the zoning. Yes, the control zoning is, because that's what I think we have, is to say this is what we envision in that corridor.
And I think that makes sense, zoning for the general plan and for, you know, what fits, but to me, that's a separate issue from, you know, water constraint. And so
I see it as being all in one, actually, that it's kind of hard to separate. Because we are concerned about water needs. When the car wash came previously, we were all relieved to understand that this particular car wash had a system in place to recycle what, like 70% of the water? But that's, and even he said at the time that that is not the norm. They went to extra measures with that car wash. We can't be sure the one that comes in 2 weeks is going to do anything near that conscientious. And then we're leaving the door open to just, particularly when we're looking at areas in the city saying we need to conserve water here, we need to watch out for natural resources. So I don't know how we can separate these two.
Okay,
PRUs, residential units, whatever. So when we purchase water, from neighbors, which is 16, that comes into zone 1, which is all of our. Thank you. The residential units are different because that Weaver Basin water just go up there to down here it does. So once those areas are it automatically filters purchase of new water from Weaver Basin, which will be paid by the impact of that developer by more for zone 1. That makes sense. So if it say
Developer pays
say
for
we
the
have
additional
50,
capacity.
Say we have 50, we'll just throw that out there, and that's not the number. So we have 50. That they need 100. Those developments that are coming after the years that will pay the impact initial cost of purchasing the amount of water used for
Is that just a one-time impact fee or is that
that.
perpetual?
But that pays for that. But that's just so one.
higher cost.
Yes, but that doesn't help the outside, that helps someone. Commercial, just to help you that way. That's saying the Weaver Basin has the water available, which they.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's not
But
an
we don't know
infinite.
that way.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify my concept.
Which is why I bring it back to the map as where do we see using
So,
our
but
land.
that is paid commercially in the right of commercial development there. So that's good to know. Very good.
Wouldn't know what the
I don't
future of their
think so.
businesses are, so that's the problem. is
And that's, yeah, I think that would be somewhat challenging. And Brent brought this comment up as well, but one major user of water is food production. And food is something that we all utilize. I mean, it's tricky.
We also have the realization, recommendation we make, those city council, and they have the opportunity there to completely throw it out, what we're recommending, or adapt it. So it's not like we are the final authority on this. We are making an educated judgment of what we think will work moving forward. And the city council will have fun.
They may turn around and send it back to us. That's happened before too, where they say they don't
And
have
they
enough
could.
information.
You're skipping shit over there.
No, they send it back again
And they
and
could,
we
can.
review it, look at it, work with staff to dig into
they
it.
could.
That's happening. So. Yeah. Jeff, what are you thinking? You're being quiet. right?
Well, yeah, I mean, my only thoughts were as I like the look of free market. I kind of, I know we got one coming in on Brent's property on 2700 North and I have a hard time seeing 5 or 6 car washes along that road.
There's already 5.
Well, yeah, I know, like, it's hard to see more than that, but, but at the same time, I kind of think that, if we had more, it's probably a good thing for our tax base, right? I mean, and the sales tax revenue, but I mean, I don't know, I mean, I think, to Brent's point, I hadn't thought about his concerns in his district but, certainly the manufacturing comes into his building, they're gonna need water. And I know that's a separate issue than car washes, but. So, I mean, can you just do like I was thinking just make it a conditional use in every zone and set those conditions. I don't know,
So we
Maybe
can't,
that's-
we
maybe
can't
I
set the conditions this evening. There are conditions.
Sure,
in the
right.
code. They don't relate to water at this time, but you could make a recommendation to have, and I don't remember which ones are conditional or not, but have all of the car wash uses conditional. And that could encompass B as well, because it's noticed. And then furthermore, to have some additional conditions looked at relative to water. I think that could be a motion.
So let me ask you this, Jeff.
Yeah.
Why would you not, because you mentioned that you can see Brent's opinion, but why would you not, going back to Julie's motion, do you see these things being in the C12, CP12? I mean, I don't see them.
I was just looking at the map, right here, and you look at the CP1, there's not much CP1 in the city. Sure, we could,
But I guess my thing is,
yeah,
don't we want to keep our retail? Don't we want to keep, kind of manufacturing? Hopefully we'll bring a retail in. And so, but if someone says, hey, here's a quick little spot and snap up the wash, what do we want that corridor to look like, I guess?
right, yeah, I mean, if we said, a conditional use in that, I think it's the MP1 zone, you've kind of got anything west of Mountain View Landing, could put something along. Oh, but I think that's actually the who's that big manufacturer right there?
Oh,
Sorry,
the grill.
yeah, there you go. So they're right there, so you couldn't do that anyway. But yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's probably a good compromise, better than just saying no. So I mean, I'd be open to that. But
Been going open.
It, so the way that the ordinance is framed, that wouldn't be allowed as an accessory, because it would be explicitly not allowed. So that, yeah, again, depends on.
That's my thing is like I said, when we go back to the quick quack, we was like, they're like, well, there's one right across the street, and then there's one behind the 70, just. Well, you're talking something more like what is it? The one behind Wendy's. Most people don't know there's a car wash back behind the Wendy's at 76 or 66 or whatever they are now. They keep changing So, I mean, I think if that's what you're looking at, but we would almost, then it's almost like we got to table it to say, okay, which zones do we allow that in? Which ones do we dare want it? And we make a specific shape and have staff come back and say, okay, if we limit it to this shape, then it would accommodate footprint, better wording, thank you. That would accommodate a possibly a convenience store, but I'm thinking, how many more tunnels do we want?
Could another way to approach that for now, just to make it all conditional use while we figure it out?
What does that give you?
So what that would mean
Conditional
is
is
any,
fair.
I mean, it's allowed, but it would also bring every single proposal for a car wash before the planning commission for
Yep.
consideration.
Yeah, that would be,
That's open door because conditional doesn't really.
yeah, okay.
But we could possibly, and that's where we're vetting out, look at setting some conditions and maybe it would be footprint or I don't know. And we've got to work with some legal staff to kind of work through what our options might be with that. And I mean, even generally looking at, and maybe that's not what we want to do, but you know, some water type restrictions too. It's just with the drought conditions right now, I think the consideration is really looking at what types of uses and
And if someone wants to go, are they going to put the recyclable, are they going to spend that kind of money to put the recyclable resources into it? So it may be a higher water use than a full blown one. So I mean, I'm back to full circle. Right?
Okay,
We really
so-
don't know.
so let me go back, just for instance, on my initial proposal of allowing it in the MCN and conditional use. Even if we were denying these other uses, it doesn't prevent somebody coming forth, like what Grant suggested, somebody with a store, convenience store, and they come forth and say, but we've got this. At that point, we can look at changing it.
but it would be an ordinance amendment. So I mean, if that's
It would
something
be
that
an
you're
ordinance.
interested in, yeah, I think it would be. It pretty much does preclude it. I mean, and anybody can always come and look at an ordinance. And would eliminate this. So, yeah, I think, and I guess just back to setting all of these as conditional. Yes, you know, maybe there's not a lot of conditions that can be set, but the questions can be asked about the conservation and some of those things too. It's just not an automatic. But
Basically, still you allow it. You ask the question when we're ready to, but it's hard for us.
The only place it would help is if we allowed it in, or in the MCM.
And I guess I could see some help if we're able to develop some standards and the conditions for the various zones, but that's something we're not.
So the question is, again, if we table it, does that leave an open door policy until we figure it out, which could take 1 month, 3 months, who knows?
And I don't have a defined answer on that. I don't know, Laurie, what your thoughts would be. I put people to a date certain, so if you people do your December 1st meeting. Okay, even if it's tabled, but we can't table it. That's fine. The table to a date certain.
But if you're tabling it, what do you want specifically as staff? We're going to revisiting it December 1st for what?
I don't want to table it.
I'm just.
What I
that's what I'm just.
So I don't know.
So do you want to deny this? You want to move forward? If you table it, but if you table it, and I'm okay with that. I like your idea of saying December 1st or a date specific, because ultimately we answer to the citizens, people that we're trying to do business in. So we can't just say, hey, we're tabling this for.
Indefinitely.
Well, and if there's a high enough level of discomfort and it feels like there may be, I mean, there could be just a recommendation of denial as well. And
But my question on that is, do we want to deny it in all areas, or are you still just uncomfortable with a few areas? And that's why we can give a hybrid of this. This doesn't have to be cut and dry. But that's why I say, if you want to table it, either we deny it or we approve it, or with modifications. But if we table it, I go back to, I'd like to say, what is it you would like to see from staff? Otherwise, they're just gonna go back. and
Yeah,
say,
otherwise we really shouldn't be tabling
Yeah.
it. We don't have a specific.
I try to buy as much of the corn dogs as I can and fast food as I can to keep them in business.
Possibly.
But we don't have much neighborhood commercial to do left. But I go back to what you're saying is, okay, let's pull up where is the neighborhood commercial, the C1, and what do we have left? Where is C1? Strong market, so if you come wipe that out, drop anything on there, you got a car wash right into the town.
Neighborhood commercial is the C1, so that one is currently allowed.
You know, what, C1 here, the C1.
Daycare. That one in city has.
This is C1.
Can the wording be limiting the number of stalls? Yeah,
Thanks, Brent, appreciate your visit.
if the wording be limiting the number of stalls, that would not then.
So you're doing foot traffic.
Yeah,
Like
that would not rule out, like a convenience store on the corner. Most of them that I have seen have had like one automatic car wash connected to it. It's not like a bay of 6. And that would not rule them out.
That's something that I'd recommend tabling to look at if that's something you're interested in. That we just took a little bit of research as staff to bring a proposal forward and what that would entail. But I will say it gets a little I mean, it's easier to say all of this is or isn't allowed in this zone versus. But not to say that we can't do footprint. We did footprint with the assisted living and the amount of finance. So I mean, we could find terrible.
Do more than one thing. We could say we don't want it in this area. And then we could table some of it.
I would recommend doing just all of it.
It's
Yeah.
open to the system. But when it comes back to us, we could say, hey, we'd like to see you break it out to sections. So.
Hey,
I think we can agree that there are some areas we wouldn't want the car wash.
I agree.
I agree with that. I mean, as a group, do we see it in the neighborhood commercial? I mean,
No, it is.
I don't see that, so that's an easy no,
This is
right?
where it's a little confusing now. So CP1, this is CP1. So it's not neighborhood commercial, but this is where Strong Market is. So
But
it's
where-
planned commercial.
Where is a neighborhood commercial C1? Let's just step through this real fast because we're dragging it way longer than this ever should have done. But what is currently C1? Let's just, you know, if we can take this and just look at it as from a group and just say, hey, let's start narrowing it down and just, you know, this is just. What do you, can you use a pointer, just let's all look at the same spot or one? Okay, so what is that?
Little pocket on the first side,
but look, it's,
That's the church now. But if someone wanted to bulldoze the church down, they could car wash it,
that's the one.
okay? It used to be C1 across the street from it too, right next to it.
Down. And that's not, well.
Isn't, is the nursery
Oh, you know
C1?
what, that's the only comment.
Is the nursery C1? Then Roman?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, as odd as it is, it's not, it's planned commercial. So, it's neighborhood commercial, we've been changing up all of our commercial.
Roman CP1. Okay, so that's changed. Okay, so,
And then
So-
straw markets also.
so the question is C1, nobody sees
We
that.
don't want it there. CP1, we wouldn't want it there. Where's CP2?
It was right here. And there's a little corner piece of it here as well. Down over here, there's a portion.
Okay, does anybody see a need for a car wash in any of those locations?
Oh, there's another CP.
CP2?
That was the CP2, right?
That doesn't affect the existing one.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the.
So that one will stay in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And then the C2 zone, which is the C. Oh, there we go. That's the residential corridor right across the bottom.
Well, and that, isn't that something
I'm
we
sorry.
wanted to have all the resident or commercial slash retail, we're hoping, or some type of retail corridor. Do you want to fill that up with car washes?
Got one going in on the CP2 right there where the
And so when we looked at that one going in there on Brent's, I looked at, for a point of clarification when it says, I don't have anything to do with any car washes, there is one being built on his development there, so. But the statement was made back in that commission meeting that we would have one on the east end of town and we have several on the north end of town. And so what that thought was, we've got cars coming and going.
and
I wouldn't want to use up our CP2 or the C2 categories for that. So I don't see a need for any more of it, so. So the only question is then do we look at it from an MP1 or an MCO?
We're kind of snapping a chalk line though on. With this point in time, we're saying there can be only this many car washes. And over, that commercial corridor, we don't know what's gonna happen. Could be businesses coming and going and buildings being taken down and other to me, it's hard for me to know. Again, taking the water side and just going off of the general plan, how do we limit one? Again, I mentioned this before. I feel like I'm just restating. How do we limit just one entity or one type of business based upon the fact that we don't like what it looks like, or we don't?
Well, we do that all the time, and I will say that's how our zoning ordinances are. So each zone tells you what's allowed and what's not allowed in the zones. So that's.
I mean, you go to Park City and many cities, and that's what the zoning does, is determine the look and feel of the city.
But I can
So that's
drive
not-
down Riverdale Road. To me, that's 2,700. That's what we're becoming. Okay, just because that's
Can be, it cannot be too, depending on what.
well, based on the amount of traffic, this is what it's going to become. When you drive down, and you can start at the top, clear up by the old. It's the Larry Miller now. There's a brand new Maverick at the top. Come down, and you're going to run into a gas station on the south side that has a car wash. You go a little bit further and you've got another Maverick. I'm trying to think it further along. There's a Quick Quack. So to me, I mean, again, we're snapping this chalk line saying right now, this is what we're going to make this development be. And we're going to just limit it one area or one focus. And to me, it's kind of what Jeff was mentioning, just that free market where we're just going to say free market, you can't have 2,700 because we're going to control. And the fear to me is if you don't allow businesses to come in a free market, we're going to be, we're not going to have businesses come.
I think we're losing sight, though, of what our concern was with the last car wash. It really came down to water. And when he shared how much water was being used on that one facility, that's when the red light went on. And we thought, how many of these can we allow using this amount of water when we already have car washes? So I'm not sure that it's, oh, I hate the look of a car wash. It's going to look, it's looking at what resources do we have? How do we want to use these resources? And what's the wisest course of action? And at the time, we had felt this is okay, but wow, we'd never really considered how much water. Maybe we had better look at putting some parameters in place to have a control. And the way to control that is through zoning.
And that's fine. So in preparation for this, I have one page that doesn't talk about the rationale. It says we're going to change the zoning text amendment. And there's no discussion in it about water concerns. There's no.
I will express my sincere apologies. We've been out of planner for 2 months. I've been doing city council packets and planning commission packets back to back to back to back to back, and my capacity is.
No, and we wouldn't expect. I mean, we wouldn't expect more. I think there's just not enough information for me. I think this should be tabled for us to provide a recommendation to the planning commission. I think we need more information. I said that at the beginning. What that information is, that's hard for me to exactly know, but water impact, that's huge right now. But how can we make a determination and say this is what needs to happen without that information in front of us? How can we say that, the Quick Quack car wash is going to, cost the city all this additional money and all of this additional water if we don't have that information in front of us? I'm just asking for more information.
You know what? I really have a great respect for all of our commissioners here. And I think it's important that we are allowed to get on the same page and get information, because everybody has brought forth valid points and concerns. And I think that needs to be respected. And I'm wondering if we couldn't table this with a date for our next planning commission meeting. And in the meantime, ask our staff to provide more information, in particular, maybe on even footprint along 2700 North, options that wouldn't be throwing out a convenience store or other things.
Yeah.
And also give us the information that we need in order to be on the same page, or at least the majority of us.
Staff,
You know.
maybe staff can look at
Yeah.
what other cities are when we've said other cities are doing it. Maybe they can give us some suggestions of what other cities are currently doing it to limit that. So that sounded really good. Do you want to make a motion?
Just one moment. So we have a new planner starting next Monday.
That's what.
I wonder if we could wait until our January meeting to give a little bit of
That'll
lead
be-
time, and that'll help. And I am sorry, I felt horrible about packets, but I
No,
have
don't.
been working every single night. It's been insane. So
I think Chad brings really a
point.
valid point forward.
And let's look at what other cities are doing. What are other options?
Mhm.
If we did the footprint, what are some of the footprints some of those others are using? But, you know, they may be more water.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have Tyson address some of the water concerns, so.
And with is genuinely enough time. I mean, we're not on a
Well,
necessarily.
let's say we do have some pending applications
Yeah.
that want to sit on car washes.
Okay.
We need to give it a time so people can look at it. That doesn't mean we have to take action on it again. If we don't like something, we can always deny it, approve it, or ask for a table of one more meeting and ask for a little more.
Yeah.
But it's gotta be very specific and tabling it forward.
Yeah.
I like what you've stated, so
Otherwise,
Go.
it's an open door in the meantime,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure that's. Yeah, first, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Well, my apologies.
been in my
again.
car, huh?
So Chad, do you want to make a
Yes,
motion on that?
I'll propose, a motion, let me get back to the front here. Okay, so it is, we're looking at, item number 4A,
Gonna be A and B,
A and B.
or do we need to open as a public hearing and then table it also? Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just saying.
Okay.
So I motion that we table item 4A, the zoning ordinance text amendments to disallow the use of car wash, self-service, et cetera, until the January meeting,
Right then.
where we'll have additional information from staff.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion on the table? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move to item B. We need to open that to a public hearing. Can someone open?
I'll make a motion. We open the public hearing for item number 4B.
We have a motion to open the public hearing for zoning ordinance text amendment modifying the car wash for CP3. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody from the public that would like to address the 4B item? Hearing none, we close the public hearing, so I'll make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we table number.
Close the public
Sorry,
hearing.
I'll make a motion first of all, that we close the public.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. By Julie, do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now do we have a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we table number 4B zoning ordinance text amendment modifying the car wash self-service spray.
January.
The January,
We have a motion on the table.
until we, and so
Until
that we can gather more information.
we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 4C, zoning ordinance text amendment considered disallowing single family dwelling as the use and permitted manufacturing zone FP1. And I will just for the quick record, because you can say, well, we don't have much information. I was opposed to that one, and we should have changed that one years and years and years ago. So we don't have people using up our MP1. So let's just, for a quick review, let's review where our MP1 is. That's light pink.
And this item has just as much information as the others, so if you'd like to table it, that's just an option. I apologize again for the black thing. So the one is it's the purple, light purple.
The light purple. So we have this whole corridor. Is this here also, which is industrial wrapped around? The
Well,
only question that I had in this is we currently have This is
Grandfather.
MCM, right?
Yes,
But that's the.
manufacturing commercial mix.
It was a trailer court, now it's kind of a hodgepodge. Are those considered single dwelling? I guess they are.
So that's actually not,
Is that down
the
here?
trailer park community is right here.
And
So
what's
that's
that now? Is that,
adjacent to- That's Parkland Boulevard.
what's it?
Generally manufacturing, if you come up to the tip of it, we have,
Oh, yeah, this,
you might remember the winery.
right. So my thought is, why in the world would we ever think of wanting to have single family homes? I think the only one where we have a single family home is somewhere right in here. And I'm not sure if there's any other single family homes that are, would be non-existent. That's just my thoughts. Any other thoughts on this one?
I think this one's an easy one.
So is the text currently reads, someone could come in and put a subdivision?
Single, so
No.
a single family.
Single
just a-
family homes
just
are
a-
allowed
Oh, wow.
in its own. So somebody could come in and put, yeah, to your point, a subdivision, single family home.
In the middle of the,
Yeah.
But it is absolutely an option at this time.
well,
Any other discussion, question, or just,
Yeah, I just see this as a cleanup item, just as James mentioned.
want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll motion.
Did we
Um,
did
just
open,
open a public hearing.
Public hearing.
we opened the public hearing.
I will make a motion that we open 4C to a public hearing.
We have a
Second that.
second, we have a second, all in favor, say aye.
Sorry.
Anybody from the public that would like to address us at this time? Let's close our public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing for item number 4C.
We have a motion to close, we have a second,
I'll second.
okay? And just to make sure we are, for the record, this is for 4C zoning ordinance text amendment, consider disallowing single family dwelling as a use in the permitted manufacturing zone NP1. Would anybody like to make a motion at this time?
Our motion, the approval of 4C zoning ordinance text amendment.
And we're the recommending, so we're recommending to the city council approval for the change. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Just a long way around, but we got one.
Hey, that's okay.
Okay, so we'll be able to move on that. Let's go ahead and, it's not on our agenda, but we'll have for C and A, or E, F, and G, but staff, is there anything the commission? Communications, is a quick reminder, we have 2 meetings scheduled this month, is that right?
So the other meeting this month is not a meeting, but it's a holiday gathering celebration. But it would be helpful to do it during your other meeting and this month prior to the begin on the holiday season, if that works for us.
What does that mean during? Does that mean if somebody wants to bring?
No, it's not a scheduled meeting, it's a social gathering, but I just did it during the regular meeting date and time, just for your convenience, because usually that night's free.
And aren't we, because we're all gathered, then does that technically?
Because it's a social gathering, it's not a public meeting, just don't be
Okay.
discussing planning commission business, and then that'll avoid any issues with state law.
Just for clarification, which will bring me back to one of my staff items I didn't bring up last week, I apologize. Just as a quick reminder, that's a good case in point, and anytime we start sending emails, they those type of things back. I always try to address mine directly to staff, and then let them review, answer questions, and they can disseminate back to the group. Because if we start doing this little email chain and things like that, the way I was trained and taught, if you reply to her, but you reply to all of us, I'm just making this the case in point, then in a sense, that becomes a meeting and it becomes discoverable. And so if someone wants to go and research all of your emails and everything else, so I have found it very easy for myself is if I have a question, I go directly and say, hey, what about this? A lot of times she goes, oh, well, think about it this way.
Well, and I mean, even to further clarify though, if you're emailing staff or amongst each other, it's all grandma requestable as well. So I mean, even if it's just to me, like, then if somebody put in a grandma request for a specific item or property, then that would come up as well. So I think use caution with, I know that there's been some entities that have had issues with unprofessionalism in some of the dialogue, and it's come out, and it's been unfortunate. And really, we don't have a place for unprofessionalism here, but we've not had issues with the planning commission.
So I found it really, staff's been outstanding. They pick up the phone, ask questions, or, you know, if you don't have an email saying, hey, could you make sure we cover this? And then if they do some quick research, they're able to blast it out to us in extended packet. So if you wanted to, you could have said, hey, can you give us any more on that? Then if they were able to or had time, they could blast it out to all of us again and then research it. Then it's kept as a matter of fact rather than someone said, well, you guys are talking about it ahead of time. And it's just the way it kind of looks. Frank Mon taught me, he was very strict on not letting us do that. So I learned that. So just something I learned. I like to keep things out of grammar or anything, but yeah. Anything. Discussion from staff.
Well, I've got a question for you that maybe the rest of you, at least some of you, might be interested in knowing. When there are things that are in the community, I've tried to be very careful not to speak out on Facebook or anything along that way, because I try and keep an open mind until we have our meetings. After Planning Commission, as a citizen of Pleasant View, am I then allowed to speak out on issues that I might feel strongly about?
And I would say absolutely yes, but I would caution you. So like, let's say there's an item that you may have made a determination on, and then, you know, it comes before the city council. If you, and again, it is your speech, you have every right to do it, but if you come and make comments, there may be perceptions, and whether right or wrong, it just may be that you had predetermined notions prior to making your recommendation. And whether or not that, again, it's not maybe fair, it's not true. And maybe that's something you could speak to, you know, if you wanted to come to planning commission, if you wanted to come to planning commission comment now, city council, but maybe, you know, you could speak to that, you know, this wasn't a predetermined decision, or the way you made your recommendation for planning commission was using a different filter.
Or can you speak?
Absolutely, you are not limited.
You can
You are not
speak
limited.
as a citizen and
Right.
just say, as a citizen.
You don't speak as a planning commissioner or a planning.
No,
commission
I would
representative.
never want to portray myself as some authority or speaking on behalf of the commission. But
Well, in the city I worked in prior, we
but
had
I
a
just
planning
want
commission.
to know,
so
as a
you never know.
citizen of Pleasant View, you know, you can still have opinions.
Oh,
on
absolutely.
things.
And you should share. And most of you probably are engaged, and so that makes perfect sense. And well, and if it's an item that the body's made a recommendation on, I would just try to, you know, that's, you know, recommendation from this body. This is me, Julie Farr speaking, or just differentiate that as best you can. You know, the planning commission's role is to look at the land use side of this. This is how this impacts me.
Any other comments?
Not clean back, but
Staff, any comments or anything?
I don't think so. Just let me know if, and I didn't see any emails, but if there's any dietary restrictions for that. Okay.
All right,
Is it here? Yes, it'll be here. It'll be catered.
or just a chance to
Do
sit
we get to
visit.
sit here with our?
If you want, but you get to bring your press one, so I guess you can put their table down here.
Take a motion that we adjourn for the night. All in favor, say aye. Okay, that's one motion I get to make.
Andy, I need you to sign my one. Here you go.
Hey, if you guys want to know, city council,